For the past 6 months, she had been walking to and from work every day. She hoped for a better way, but she knew this was the best option. At first, the 10-mile walk to work was hard for her, but after 6 months, it got much easier. She soon got used to it. However, one day, everything changed when she noticed that a police officer was following her. Mandy Jean Beasley was a typical 40-year-old woman living in Chicago, Illinois. She was a single mom with 2 young boys and worked as a waitress, doing her best to provide for them. Life was good until early 2021 when her company laid off several workers, including her. This news shocked her and her coworkers, as the company needed to cut back due to the struggling economy. Mandy had to use her savings to support her boys and knew she needed to find a new job quickly to avoid losing everything. Finding a new job was harder than she expected, as many employers chose other candidates. But she didn't give up and spent months searching job boards until she found a position that fit her skills. However, there were some big problems. The new job paid less than her last one and was 10 miles from her home. She didn't have extra money for the commutes since she was in debt after being unemployed for almost a year. Still, Mandy decided to take the job. On the day of her interview, she was accepted. As she was heading home that afternoon, she realized she could walk to work to save money for her bills and debts. Mandy bought a pair of walking shoes and started walking to and from work every day. At first, it was tough, but over time, she found that she was not only saving money, but also enjoying the walks. Then one day, everything changed. Mandy took her usual route to work on a gloomy Tuesday morning. It had rained the previous day and throughout the night, and the streets were covered with flowing rainwater. Mandy was about 3 miles away from work when she realized a car was trailing her. At first, she didn't think much about it, but then she noticed something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Sergeant Scott Bass from the Nash County Sheriff's Office was driving along in his cruiser when he noticed a familiar figure appear on the road ahead. He was passing the Stomach Mobile Home community and had hoped to find her there. He had some business with her today, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Mandy realized how close to the curb the car was. It was also driving slowly, as if to let her know it was following her. "Oh Lord, not today," Mandy whispered as she got a closer look at the vehicle, seeing that it was a police cruiser. Although she'd never been in trouble with the police before, she knew such occurrences were inevitable. Suddenly, it began to rain harder. Mandy tried to open her umbrella, only for it to be whipped out of her hands by the freezing wind. She still had a long way to go, but she pressed on through the torrential downpour, stepping carefully over the pools of water that swirled and conspired to break her footing. The last thing she wanted was for the cop to stop her today. Mandy was getting tired from trying to walk faster than the police car that was clearly following her. Her feet were wet and hurting, and even though she had worn her most comfortable sneakers, she could feel blisters starting to form. She felt annoyed. She was just trying to go about her day. Why couldn't the cop leave her alone? Mandy let out a frustrated breath as she kept walking, doing her best not to run away. Even though she knew she hadn't done anything wrong, she glanced over her shoulder and saw the car turn on its red and blue lights as it got closer. She slowed down, hoping for the best. The cruiser pulled up next to the curb and stopped. Mandy had only been stopped by the police a few times in her life, and those encounters had never been tense. The officers had just asked her a few questions before leaving. But something inside her told her this time would be different. The officer slowly pulled up beside her and rolled down his window. The officer stuck his head out and said, "Come over." There was no way to run. She couldn't ignore him anymore. Mandy had never trusted police officers, and she immediately felt scared. Her head started to spin. Was she really in trouble just for walking to work? But there was no way to avoid it this time. Mandy took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and stepped toward the car, noticing the license plate and the words "Sheriff Nash County" on the side. She heard the officer speaking, but it took her a moment to understand what Sergeant Scott Bass was saying. Then, as she processed his words, her eyes widened in disbelief. Sergeant Scott Bass asked her to get into the vehicle and told her that she shouldn't be on the street. In a flood of stuttering and panic, she tried to explain to him that their livelihood depended on her getting to her office, but he didn't seem to be listening. Well, she was in the vehicle now, she thought, and she wasn't about to argue with the law. Her fate now rested entirely in his hands. Mandy sat in silence in the officer's car, wondering where he was taking her. She entwined her fingers and placed them over her chest protectively, then let them fall into her lap with a sigh. Appearing nervous wasn't going to help anything. Was he taking her in for questioning? She glanced at him shiftily, but he continued to drive through the rain, his eyes on the road ahead. Mandy was not at all comfortable with the situation. After all, this man had just ordered her into his car, and she had stupidly complied. She should have run, she thought. Even if he was a cop, could she trust him? And where was he taking her? Her mind raced with possibilities. Then, in the headlights, she saw the sign looming through the downpour. He had taken her to her workplace. While commuting to the sheriff's office of Nash County, Sergeant Scott Bass had noticed Mandy on more than one occasion, and he recognized her uniform. He had realized that she had been making the 10-mile journey on foot to work every day. The truth of the matter was that nobody should be walking on these roads at this time of year. When they arrived, the officer said, "Here we are. This rain is nothing to scoff at." But he didn't unlock the door. Mandy's brows drew close, and she realized the officer wasn't joking when a look of worry spread over his face. She was still mulling over his words when he revealed why he'd stopped her. "I've been seeing you walk this route for more than 3 months now," the officer said. "Do you live close by?" Mandy shook her head, saying, "I live about 7 miles down the road." "And you walk that distance every day?" the officer asked. "I do. It seems long, but you get used to it," said Mandy with a smile. "Well, that changes today," the officer said. Mandy had no idea what he had in mind. Mandy took the officer's offer. He said he'd be delighted to drop her at work every day. She was apprehensive about the situation, but then she realized the officer truly wanted to help. He was humble and attentive, listening to Mandy's misfortunes and why she was walking to work every day. Little did she know that he was planning something big behind her back. Sergeant Scott Bass continued to give Mandy lifts to work whenever the weather turned bitter and whenever she would allow it. It normally took her 2 hours to walk to work and 2 hours to walk back home each day, so she welcomed the gesture. Sergeant Bass was impressed with her perseverance and determined to do more. He hastily contacted a local Walmart to see if they could help. Then he did something that would change her life forever. Mandy waited at her usual spot on the road, feeling nervous. Sergeant Bass had called her and said he needed to meet with her urgently, which made her uneasy. Old feelings of distrust for the police came back, and she worried she was going to be scolded, even though she didn't know why. As she wondered what was happening, she saw the officer pull up in his cruiser. He called her over, and she was unsure of what to expect. Then he took something big out of his car and proudly showed it to her. It was a brand new Squint Fair Haven Women's Cruiser bicycle. Soon, news of the officer's kindness spread through the town. Local reporters rushed to interview Sergeant Bass. "I wanted to help Mandy because she walks 5 miles to work every day, no matter the weather. She stands all day at her job and then walks 5 miles back home, which is truly admirable." He told the media, "I wanted to help lessen her burden of that 10-mile walk." The video of the interview was posted on YouTube and quickly gained over 6,000 views and many comments. People loved the story. The Nash County Sheriff's Office also shared a post on Facebook about Sergeant Bass's kindness, which the community really appreciated. From the comments, it was clear that people were proud to have such a generous officer who was always ready to help those in need. "I'm as shocked," Mandy said about the officer's amazing gift. "I didn't think it was real." She was incredibly grateful that she no longer had to walk the tough 10 miles to work. For the first time in months, after a lot of bad luck, things finally seemed to be getting better for her and her family, thanks to the kindness of one cop who wanted to help his community. Now, Mandy could keep working, earn money, and support her children. After a lifetime of distrusting the police, Sergeant Bass changed her view of them. She now knew that the officers in her community truly cared about her well-being.